All right, so we got an email. Let's go ahead and get right to it. This person says, "Hey Jordan, I've had one of the worst episodes of DPDR that I've ever had yesterday. Just so you know, DPDR is an acronym because saying depersonalization realization takes forever. They're the longest words that have ever been created. If I'm doing like a thumbnail image for a YouTube video, it's so hard to put the words on there. Anyway, so people just say DPDR, depersonalization, right? That's what the DP is for. It's where you feel detached from your body. And then DR is derealization. And that's where you feel detached from the material world. Now, these are trauma coping mechanisms. And trauma is not an event, it is a state of overwhelming stress in the body and nervous system. We know that from the world's leading trauma experts. Most people have a 20th century understanding of trauma. They're thinking of an event, but it's not. It's a state of overwhelming stress in the nervous system. First, we try to fight or flee. And if we can't fight or flee and our nervous system feels trapped, then we go into the most ancient freeze response. That's also called the trauma response. And once you reach that state of traumatic stress and your brain thinks that you're about to be eaten by a lion, even if there is no danger, your brain will try to help you out by dissociating you. Dissociation comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate, and it's trying to separate you from your body, separate you from the material world to mitigate the pain of being eaten by a lion. And according to statistics, over half of all people will experience these symptoms at some point in their life, but most people don't even know what to call them. And for most people, they go away in less than a month. According to statistics, which I think are way low, 2% of people will experience them constantly for more than a month. You can experience just DP, just DR, or both of them together. That was me. I experienced them both at the same time sometimes. Other times it would be just depersonalization. Other times it would just be derealization. I struggled with the symptoms for 2 years, 24/7, 5 years off and on. And these symptoms were the most terrifying thing that I've ever been through. And I will tell you, people usually are not just experiencing DPDR. I just did a YouTube short the other day, and I read the intake form of one of my clients, and insomnia, um, and generalized anxiety, panic attacks, intrusive anxious thoughts. We see health anxiety all the time. All the strains of OCD. I've had 3 clients today that we're dealing with OCD in various strains: harm OCD, symmetry OCD, existential OCD, contamination OCD. That's very common. Of course, a lot of them are depressed. The list goes on and on. Time can feel distorted, memory gets fragmented and thrown off. Friends and family feel like strangers. There's just a long list, but I talk about DPDR because those are the symptoms that people are usually searching for, because these are, in particular, some of the most terrifying symptoms out of that whole host of symptoms that you can experience in fight, flight, freeze response. And also, people typically think that the symptoms are the problem, which is why you probably Googled and got to this video, or maybe you're just one of my followers. But regardless, I'll tell you that the symptoms aren't the problem. It's actually your brain trying to help you. I just dropped something from my desk. But anyway, it's your brain trying to help you. And if you're trying to directly get rid of the symptoms, you are wasting your time. That is a distraction. That's just like having a check engine light on the car. And instead of actually looking underneath the hood, and maybe the transmission needs to be changed out, maybe the engine needs to be overhauled, got some spark plugs that are messed up, the front end is messed up, you're spending all your time trying to get the light to shut off that is really pointing to the real problem. But because DPDR is so freaking terrifying, I know what I did. I thought that they were the problem. I just used deductive reasoning. You know what? I've got a lot of symptoms, but these are horrifying, so they must be the root of all of my problems. And I had no idea what was going on. So anyway, back to the email, but just to give a little bit of education about what these symptoms are, just in case you're new to the channel. So I was at my usual coffee shop, a place I've been going to for years. The barista knows my name. I know hers. But while waiting for my latte, it was like someone switched out reality for a fake copy. So it sounds like you might be describing derealization. The lights seemed too bright, and everyone around me felt off. Not like strangers, but like actors pretending to be strangers. So that's quite the nuance. Even my body felt alien. So there we have depersonalization. Like my hands weren't my own. I used to do that all the time. I would stare at my hands and I would feel like my soul was detached from my body. It was absolutely terrifying. And if I would feel it, I would go, ugh, and I would try to get away from it. And then I would constantly check all the time, and I would look in the mirror. Do I feel connected? I would scan my environment. Does that tree feel real? Look at the sky to see if there's still derealization. I started checking all the time obsessively as well, which was one of the things that I had to break, because that was actually part of what was inducing the symptoms, because every time I checked, it was stressful if the symptoms were still there. So I stared at the wooden table in front of me, trying to ground myself by tracing its grains with my eyes, but it didn't help. Yeah, I mean, inevitably, whenever the people who work with me have gone to a therapist, they've been told to do grounding techniques, which I want to be clear, I freaking love therapists. I love licensed mental health professionals. I think that they're wonderful people. There's some bad eggs. I can tell you some stories that I won't say because I don't want you to think that that's representative of all therapists or psychiatrists, but I have heard some stories. There are some people that should not be doing what they're doing. They have absolutely just like traumatized people by not really doing their due diligence of trying to figure out what they're dealing with. But most of them are wonderful people trying to do a good work. But unfortunately, a lot of times they haven't had a lot of history with clients with DPDR, or they just don't know a lot about the symptoms, and usually they haven't experienced them. And this recovery path is so nuanced that if you haven't either been through the symptoms or spent a lot of time studying these symptoms, it's just extremely difficult to help people navigate through these symptoms. So in their defense, it's very difficult, but I think that that's where there should be referrals, right? But anyway, that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But grounding techniques are not bad necessarily, but if your body is in a state of traumatic stress, that grounding technique is probably not going to do much. Ground yourself to different visuals and sounds and sights and smells like that sounds really good, and maybe it's good if you have relatively low levels of stress, but that's based off of a lack of understanding, right? It's like, oh yeah, you feel disconnected, well, we need to ground you. That's based off of somebody who really just doesn't understand exactly what's happening in the body. That's what the latest 21st century understanding of trauma shows us, is that trauma is a body that is constantly preparing for a threat that never comes. And we have to do things that communicate safety to the body. And once you have made your body your safe place, you'll naturally feel grounded. So anyway, that's why grounding techniques usually do little to no good if people haven't even begun to build interoception, which is the experience of the embodied self. Because you're up here, you're not in your body, just like I wasn't. I lived perpetually disembodied. And they also haven't started to release that tension, adrenaline, and emotion and fatigue. Well, not the fatigue, but tension, adrenaline, and emotion from the body. And then that will help get rid of the fatigue. That is part of what's keeping them stuck. I stared at the wooden table in front of me. Oh, yeah, but it didn't help. Instead, I felt like I was watching a scene in a movie with no way to yell cut. That's a very good explanation. And again, these are different analogies that people use. But the problem with DPDR, and I just did a few short videos about this, is they're impossible to describe. Like, even the analogies that people use do not come close to describing the terror of these symptoms. There are no adequate words to describe these experiences, and so even the analogies really do fall short. But the best that we have whenever it comes to derealization is it does feel like everything's fake and dreamlike. It feels like a movie, feels like a wall of glass between you and reality. With depersonalization, you may feel like you're watching yourself on a video camera, like you and your body are a separate entity, things like that. But even that doesn't come close to describing it. What's worse is the shame. How do I explain to anyone that standing in a coffee shop feels like teetering on the edge of insanity? So I tell my clients this story. I remember one time I was working at Jimmy John's. I think this was like 2009, and I was eating my free Jimmy John's sandwich that I got because I was a delivery driver, and the worst delivery driver ever. I suck at direction. I'm working on it, but I'm the worst at direction. Ask my wife. And I was getting lost all the time, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. I only worked there for about 3 weeks, actually. But anyway, I was sitting in the Jimmy John's place, and I was trying to eat my little steak and cheese thing or whatever, and I felt so detached from my body. I felt really detached from my head. My tongue felt numb. My hands didn't feel real. And I remember I was so distraught and dissociated that I couldn't even finish eating the sandwich. I will never forget this. I don't remember a ton because I was so traumatized, and our memory fragments when we enter a trauma state. But I definitely remember lots of flashes of different things that happen, especially things that happen all the time. But anyway, I'll never forget throwing that sandwich away and walking out of there. And I felt the deepest level of shame. I was like, I can't even eat a freaking Jimmy John's sandwich because of these symptoms. And it was just humiliating. And everybody was watching me. Well, nobody was watching me. You get what I'm saying? If you would have been watching me, you would have felt like everything was normal. But on the inside, I literally was feeling like I was so just detached, and I felt like I was dying. I've tried grounding techniques, breathing exercises, even snapping a rubber band on my wrist. Nothing works when the wave hits full force. I ended up leaving without even touching my drink, rushing home where it's safer. That's because your body is not your safe place yet. Whenever your body becomes your safe place, you can be anywhere, right? There's nothing wrong with having, external, items or places or people that, reinforce a sense of safety. But if you have to have those things and you can't generate a sense of safety within your own body, well, now you're codependent on those items, places, and people, and it becomes problematic, and it limits your ability to thrive in life. I ended up leaving without even touching my drink, rushing home where it's safer, though I'm not sure why. Safe from what? Myself, reality. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel real again. Thanks for reading. I need to get this out. And this is from Claire. Well, thank you, Claire, for sending that. And I'm sure that a lot of people related with your situation. And I will tell you, there is hope. Okay. I've been able to beat these symptoms. I've spent the last 6 years helping people beat these symptoms that literally felt hopeless. They had tried every doctor, every therapist that they could get their hands on, every popular program, acceptance, distraction, this thing, that thing, all the mind stuff. And yet they were still able to overcome these symptoms. Okay. You need definitely a body-based strategy. Okay. That's very, very important. And you need the right neuroscience. So I've created a free masterclass. It's called the 5 Shifts to Heal from Anxiety and Trauma and DPDR. There's a link below. It will go over some of this neuroscience. So check that out. Another thing that we need to do is exposure. We need to face your life. Stop avoiding places that cause symptoms. And while you are in the presence of those triggers, which you're not going to usually know what they are, start to calm your body. That's going to be really helpful. Repeated exposure plus relaxation equals desensitization. That's one of the things to do with my clients, as well as co-regulation. Right? Work with somebody that can create a secure attachment relationship, that can really build hope during this recovery process, and somebody that can really validate your experiences. And if you'd like to apply to work with me and my team to help you with that and have those things in your life, at the end of that 5 Shifts webinar, there is a link to apply to work with me and my team. And we'd love to take a look at your situation and see if we can help. Okay. Can't work with everybody. We turn away more people than we let in, but we do have people that come into our program every single week, and people are beating these symptoms and getting their life back. Okay. You got to put in the work. It's not going to happen overnight. There's no quick fix for this. We got different layers that we have to peel. Had one client session today. We were talking about his diet. We think that there's some insulin resistance, some reactive hypoglycemia. Other client, we were talking about facing his emotions. The other client, we were talking about his morning routine, and his morning routine is terrible. The other client, we were talking about some self-regulation techniques. So, there are definitely common things for everybody, which I talked about, but a lot of recovery is nuance. That's why I really need to get in front of you. I need to see your situation. What are you dealing with? In addition to the common things that you need to do, there's a lot of specific layers of the onion that we need to peel, using that analogy. So anyway, that's it. And I hope you have an awesome day. And also subscribe, join the channel if you haven't. Click like, comment, all that stuff. And I hope you have an awesome day.